From the beautiful Cotswolds village of Elmley Castle in historic Worcestershire, welcome, dear listener, to the second episode of our new podcast. I'm Tony. Shortly, you'll be hearing the voice of my wife and co-host, Christine, and this is the R&R podcast. The R&R standing for Refinement, Not Retirement. But you'd know that because you will have listened to episode 1. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I'd recommend doing that first before listening to this one. In that episode, Christine and I explained what we meant by R&R, refinement, not retirement. While we've most certainly retired from the business that we've owned and operated together for more than 30 years, we have a take on the whole concept of retirement, which is a bit, shall we say, alternative. And perhaps, let's admit it, it might be a bit delusional. We're refining, not retiring. And looking back, the refining process has been one we've been engaged in throughout our lives together, and it's been a continuing process which now continues as we move into this new, let's not say final, this new phase of our lives together. We'll be chatting with you, dear listener, about some of these refinements being small improvements, some big ones that you make along the way in your voyage through life. And in subsequent episodes, we'll be talking about some of these. But today, we're going to talk about one of our biggest refinements, and it's a recent one. It was a radical one. And that's our escape to the country, or more specifically, to the gorgeous area of historic England known as the Cotswolds. So let's hear from Christine now. Have you got any comments on what I've said so far? Have I set that up okay, Chris? You've got anything?
No, firstly, hi, everybody. Hi, all listeners. I've been sitting here quietly while you do the introduction. But, no, I'm ready to rock and roll.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, let's set the backstory up here. So for 25 plus years, more than a quarter of a century, we lived and worked in the heart of central London. Our property was in South Kensington, a few minutes walk from Kensington Palace and the Royal Albert Hall that you'll all know. We lived in a flat within a building that would have been constructed in about the mid-1800s. It also contained our business, our company's premises. It was a fantastic setup. It worked brilliantly for us. The ideal prestigious address to impress our corporate clients, and such a convenient, exciting place to live and work. We'll talk about it, Chris. Talk about your memories of living there and how you felt about it.
Well, it's now nearly 3 years, and it sounds awful, really, but it's beginning to sort of fade into the distance. I know. We loved it, and I know we lived there, but it's like a different world now. We've moved on so quickly in the last 3 years. I just remember thinking I couldn't ever imagine leaving London, to be honest. It was I think you talked about it sometimes, and I used to say, but if we leave London, we're never going to get back in there. And why would we leave London? We're in the most beautiful part of London. We were very, very lucky. We could walk to everywhere. We were extremely happy, weren't we? I mean,
yeah.
I could never really imagine life other than there, really.
We could walk to the theatre in the West End, couldn't we? Sometimes we did that.
Yes.
We could walk to any number of restaurants, all different international cuisines, just on our doorstep. We had the fantastic tubes system to travel all around London conveniently and quite cheaply. We weren't that far from Heathrow Airport, half an hour probably in a taxi. So there was a lot of good stuff, and of course it worked really well for us with our business, as I've mentioned, and we had a lot of visitors because people always, people from overseas tend to come through London, don't they? So we had friends that we'd met through our international business and so on. And you're right. I mean, we always said, didn't we, that something really needed to happen.
Yes, we sort of thought more, perhaps, it sounds a bit dreary, but I guess we always thought perhaps, one of us would get ill, or what, we wouldn't be able to climb the stairs in our building, or something. We felt something was going to happen that would
or we'd lose a client,
cause us to
lose a major client, and that would probably put us in a spot where we would be pushed more towards giving up our business and so on. But it wasn't that, was it? It was none of those things.
Something that I don't think anybody, nothing anybody expected or even thought about, including us. It was something
it was the early 2020s, wasn't it? And
well, it was, yes. We'd just discovered our first vegan cruise, which is for another story.
Yes,
we'd been in Lanzarote, I think. The Tenerife had suddenly got this red sandstorm happening.
And we heard that there were a couple of people there who'd gone down with some strange ailment. But it was the 12th. Yeah. It was the 12th of March. I was looking back through some of my daily journals, and it was the 12th of March that a very grave announcement came from the government that we were just about to enter the quote, worst crisis for a generation. Wow. And it was that date, the 12th of March, that Boris Johnson said in a briefing that many families, and I think this blew us away when we heard it, many families would lose loved ones before their time. Remember those words?
I don't know. That's really quite frightening, really. I just do remember being very, very frightened.
Well, I don't think when we heard that brief, I don't think it had really sunk in. I mean, it was frightening to hear those words, obviously, but I don't think it had really sunk quite in. It wasn't until the 16th of March that Boris said that the UK was moving towards a lockdown, which we weren't even familiar with the word lockdown. What the hell does that mean?
No, that's right. And I think it was the 23rd we locked down, didn't we?
Yes, I think it was. I think you're right. I didn't actually look at that particular date, but I think you're right. I think it was the 23rd. Yeah, I think.
Day before Jackie's birthday. Yes, I remember it. And that was well. I think we could talk about it forever, couldn't we? But that was.
But you remember talk a bit about what it was like living in London suddenly in these strange.
Well, it was so weird because we were very living where we were on the Gloucester Road. We were very close to the A4, which is the main road that goes out to join the M4 out to Heathrow and out to the southwest. And it's one of the busiest roads, that A4 coming into London, coming into Knightsbridge, and that big.
The most polluted road, road in Europe.
Yes. Yeah, the Cromwell Road, also known as. And we walked out onto that Cromwell Road, and there was no traffic, there were no cars, there were no buses.
Yeah, it was spooky.
There was nothing, and it was eerie. It was the eeriest time, although it was thinking, oh, how lovely is London without any traffic in there. It was also very eerie. It was very, very strange. And that was when we were allowed to I think that's when we were allowed to walk, weren't we?
We were allowed to go out for exercise once
for an hour, wasn't
daily.
it? A day.
That was a myth that it was an hour. It was just once a day. They never put a time limit on it, but you were allowed to go out once a day. If you remember, the rules were, you remember some funny videos on YouTube or whatever about it on social media, but there were some funny videos because the rules were just so unclear as to what you were, what you could do, what you couldn't do.
I think it was the food situation has suddenly put everybody into a panic. Because you couldn't go out to shops, so you were ordering online. You couldn't get an online delivery. You were paying through the nose for stuff because we just had little local shops that were very, very expensive, but we felt that we just needed to get something in. So the whole mindset changed do we have enough toilet rolls?
Well, toilet rolls were the big thing, weren't they?
That became the big thing. I mean, we just all became, well, a world that we were thrown into without, and nobody knew what they were doing, did they? I mean, I know
Well, I
Boris
think the
got
thing that
blamed and
sticks,
stuff,
yeah,
but it was
I mean, a couple of things stick in my mind. We used to, even in those days, we used to enjoy our walking, and of course, our walks turned in from something that were really nice, being able to walk around Royal Kensington Gardens, Hyde Park, all of the places we used to enjoy walking. It turned from something that was a great joy into something that was very stressful, didn't it?
Well, it was. In fact, I used to, we'd go for a walk, you'd do the circuit. I remember we'd go up through the park and up through to the Notting Hill and back round was our little sort of routine circuit. And I couldn't wait to get back inside our home. I was absolutely just hating every minute of it. I was just so scared.
And the main reason for the fear was, of course, because, obviously being London, there were a lot of young people and they didn't seem to have the same concern at all about the virus. They, it was difficult to keep away from them. They would come running right by you. You'd have to make all kinds of evasive action
or cycling on the bike.
Constantly crossing the road to get out of the way from people, and so many people just didn't seem to care. We got into arguments with people because they wouldn't keep away.
We were throwing ourselves in the ditches and in the bushes, just thinking, us old folk. Well, sort of.
And I suppose another thing that might have pushed us. We've talked that this was the thing that we've talked about, the fact that this was the thing that pushed us into leaving. But we had to move from that to going to places outside of London. We'd drive for half an hour or so in order to find places like Bushy Park, which were really sort of semi-countrified. And I think that, it was about then that we started to evolve the idea that really this was the time for us to leave London, because we didn't know how long this pandemic was going to last. There was, where it was all going to go. And, we just knew that a lot of people were dying. It was very, very frightening. And the idea of being able to get out into the countryside was just so appealing. So we really actually got serious about the 9th of April was when we really started getting serious. Yes,
because we didn't have any outside space as well, if you remember. That was awful too. And it was turning out to be a really beautiful spring. And the weather was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. And we had nowhere to go other than to just go around walking and then be locked back in our flat for the rest of the day and evening. And that went on. It was almost like being, well, we were all, not just us, we were all prisoners. But we felt particularly like prisoners.
Yeah, you and I said, right, this is it. This is the time. It's time to go. We're going to get serious about this. We decided to sell our place in Kensington, and at the same time, we decided to get a narrowboat. We came to those decisions. I probably sort of twisted your arm into that because, of course, this is for another episode. We will be talking about that particular refinement when we get there. But this was something that we came to at the same time. I've always been fascinated by boats of all kinds, but we brought our daughters up with narrowboating holidays, and I just thought the idea of owning one was, especially since we were in an era or new era where you couldn't go abroad, and we didn't know when that situation was going to change. So the idea of being able to have our own little holiday home that floated all around the canal system was very, very appealing to me. I think you got into the idea as well. And so then it was just to sort of move us towards the actual move from London. We on the 2nd of May, we had a virtual viewing of a house in, is it Rowington or Rowington you pronounce it?
I think there's two schools of thought on it. I always said Rowington.
Let's stick with Rowington, and hopefully,
okay.
Maybe people will put us right if they.
Well, that's yes, yeah. That's
Rowington right. is a village not far from Stratford upon Avon, and the reason that we got interested, well, two reasons. First of all, we were discussing where we should live, and you came up with the idea. Well, you grew up around that sort of area, and so that would probably be a good place to start looking. And it so happened that we found a house that sort of seemed to fit our wish list, but also since we'd made this decision about getting a narrowboat, it also had the advantage of a 120-foot canal side mooring. I think it was the Grand Union Canal, if I remember correctly. That just seemed so appealing. And so we had a virtual viewing. We couldn't go out. We were locked down, so we couldn't go out to view houses at that time.
No, but I just have to say, my father played cricket for Rowington Cricket Club, so there was a lot of memories back there.
Well, now you're pronouncing it Rowington.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't know then. Rowington, I don't know.
But anyway,
Rowington,
yes, when we actually visited the cricket club, didn't we? But not that day,
yes,
because we could only do a virtual viewing. The owners of the property were very kind, and they went and actually did a video of the whole property and walked us through it, and we got very, very excited about it. At that time, and I think it was actually the 2nd of May, we also talked about buying a dog, a cockapoo.
We did, yes.
Which we thought would go really well with the country house and the narrowboat. We thought that was a terrific idea. So that
our minds shows that our minds were full of all sorts of stuff going on. Especially
all sorts of stuff.
Fill our minds with all sorts of things, didn't we?
And I was quite surprised, because I thought that the actual physical viewing, when we were allowed to do that, was actually quite some time after the virtual viewing. But in fact, it was just under 2 weeks later.
I thought it was June.
No, we went on the 15th of May.
Oh, wow. So we must, well, it was only just opened up.
Yes, it was the day after we were allowed to go out, or maybe even the first day we were allowed to go out.
Yeah, because I think it was a Friday, and so yes, I think it was.
And so we that was actually the day that we visited Rowington Cricket Club on the 15th.
Oh, wow.
Day, after we had seen Bridge Cottage, which was the name of the house, which was right by a canal bridge. We'd had a great position facing, so you actually had a long view up the canal, which is actually quite rare.
Beautiful garden.
And it had, a lovely garden. It had the 120-foot mooring, and it had a lot of things that we wanted. But in fact, we considered it to be overpriced, and also we thought that there were quite a few drawbacks. But we won't drawbacks. But we won't go into that now. So that's where we started. I got very excited about the house from the virtual viewing, but when we actually saw it in the flesh, we were less enthusiastic. Although I think
knocked it on the head pretty quickly, though.
We knocked it on the head pretty quickly. Then later that month, on the 26th of May, we went to see that house in Henley in Arden.
Oh, yeah, where I went to school. God, I see you. I was lurking all around my...
Yeah, it was my
old stomping ground,
indeed.
Yeah.
And we saw that house, and again, there were some good stuff. There was good things about it, but there were too many negatives. One of which I had forgotten until I looked at my journal again this morning. One of the things that put us off that was the busy high street there.
But it had quite low ceiling, I think, up the staircase.
There was upstairs. That was also true of Bridge Cottage. The Bridge Cottage didn't have very good bedroom accommodation either. And this was a little bit... No, it
didn't have fitted wardrobes.
This was a bit like that. And then we went to see the same day, on the 26th of May, we went to see the two houses that overlooked the paddocks. Do you remember the paddock? That there were two new houses together. And
it was in Wootton Wowen. But could I just throw in here that I just want to just say, as I'm thinking this out, we did all virtual viewings on these places because when we were in London, and this was a couple of hours drive, we really wanted to try and eliminate homes and not waste our time or the owner's time by doing some virtual viewings. And I must say, virtual viewings really do not, they're as close as you can get, but they're really very different to when you see a home in the actual flesh, if you like. It's a very different proposition. So I think I probably would never recommend anyone to buy something on a virtual viewing, because you see stuff, well, you just in the flesh that you don't see on a virtual viewing.
Yes, in fact, we got a very sort of positive view from our Bridge Cottage virtual viewing, and that was really sort of quite kiboshed by the actual physical viewing. So you're absolutely right about that. So the next, we saw those two new houses. They weren't for us. And then on the 10th of June was our big day, the big day that changed our lives. We first of all went to have a viewing of a property in Mickenden. Mickleton, thank you, Mickleton, get that right. That was a house that was very attractive to us, the house itself. But just to cut this rather short, again, the thing that put us off was when we went for a walk after, and we were considering making an offer on that house, considering it very seriously indeed. We went for a walk around the village, and we very much were put off by the busyness of the main street through Mickleton.
Yeah.
And so we decided that wasn't for us. Then we met the man who showed us our eventual house, which we were coming to, Martin. I'm not going to say the name of his firm, but he was a lovely guy, really, really honest, nice, straightforward guy. He showed us those houses that we sometimes, we used to think of as a kind of almost like a French development, brand new houses in Willersby.
Willersley.
Willersley,
Sorry.
Is it Willersley?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I just have to add, though, that we chose all these homes. I mean, this is something that we shortlisted.
From online, right? From online, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
From online research, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because a lot of the agents were saying, well, you tell us what we've got in our books and you tell us what you want to see. They weren't sort of selling anything to us as such from their properties, that we had to make the decision to look at them.
Sure.
And in fact, I hadn't realized how quickly our decision making was, because we walked into the first place with Martin and walked straight out again.
Well, we should disclose that. I mean, that is the business that we've been in for the past 30 years.
Yes,
helping people.
But doing it for ourselves, though.
No. But I'm just for the benefit of our listeners. They won't have heard this before, but we were a bit like a sort of location couple from the TV show, of course, I'm referring to, in that we helped people find their perfect home. So it was something that we had a ton of experience of, but now you're right, we were applying it for the first time for ourselves.
And it is amazing how quickly you can make a decision, because they said the first house we looked at in Willersley, we walked virtually straight out.
Well, we considered again that it was well overpriced. The developer who was marketing the property had let the garden just completely go parched and looked awful.
Yeah, but even apart from overpriced, I wouldn't have paid anything for it. I wouldn't have paid half the price, even if it was half that amount of money.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough. But from there we followed Martin in his car to the village that we now live in, which is a village that we'd never heard of, called Elmley Castle. But when we arrived in the village, before we'd even seen the house, we arrived in the village, we both turned to each other and agreed that this was exactly the sort of village that we had envisaged living in. So it was immediately...
Well, it was, yes, you immediately said, this is just where I pictured us living. You instantly knew.
Yeah, and then we turned into a private road and were introduced to the property that became our current house, probably our forever house, I would imagine, and a contemporary house, which is what we wanted, but it just had everything that we really wanted in a house and more. I'm not going to
go. It did.
I'm not going to go into great detail about the house, but that happened, and we did our. We know how to do our research because of our business, and we wanted to find out what the position of the seller was, and we wanted to find out more about the village itself. And we spent after seeing the house, we spent some time walking around the village, and unlike the other places that we've mentioned before this, everything made a positive impression on us. One main thing was that there was no main through road here to speak of, and the bit of the village that our now house is in has no through traffic at all, which is an amazing positive. We live right underneath Bredon Hill, which is the most fantastic place to walk. It has so many walks. The village itself has tons of beautiful old thatched cottages in it. I've always said I love to look at thatched cottages, but I don't really want to live in one. And that's the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But it's changed our lives beyond recognition, hasn't it, Chris? And
yes, I mean, we want to pinch. Well, we do still pinch ourselves. I think I probably might say it at least once a day. I just feel like I just can't believe it. Really, I've just never felt so lucky and happy, and just the pleasure and the happiness that we derive from this home is overwhelming. I wake up every day loving our life, loving our home, never looking back. As I said at the beginning, I know I lived in London for many, many, many years, but it's only because I know I did. But no desire ever to leave here.
And not only the village itself as a physical place to live, and the house itself, which is amazing. It's the people, isn't it? I mean, we have the most fantastic neighbours on either side of us, and all around us actually, and we get to know more and more people all the time, and it's just so different. When we lived in a flat in London, we hardly knew the people in the same building, let alone the same street.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you're looking for home, you don't necessarily. Well, we didn't even consider neighbours or even consider a lot of stuff that we've ended up with, because you have a focus on the type of home you want. But I think, and then when you look back and you think, wow, especially as you're sort of getting older, and as we're getting older, it's having people there to help you, people that you can turn to, talk to, communicate with, which, as you say, London had none of that. We didn't know anybody in the building where we lived in London, and something happens, it's just very very difficult to be, you don't have anybody to ask for help, really. And so I think that's another thing that, without even realizing, has turned out to be such an added bonus.
Yes, and at the same time,
really.
I mean, it's not
the
as though
social life too.
Absolutely, and at the same time, we're only 30 minutes drive from Cheltenham, which I described as Little Kensington, Mini Kensington, because it always reminds me of Kensington with everything that it's got going on in Cheltenham. We've got a great theatre there. And we're also in the other direction. We're 30 minutes drive from Stratford upon Avon, which is another great cultural and historic centre.
Yes, and Worcester's 20 minutes.
Indeed,
the Malvern Hills.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one wonderful area. And of course, all that said, we're still only a couple of hours from London. So it is really a great place. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now because we're coming close to the end of our 30-minute slot. So in episode 1 of this podcast, we told you about some of the things that we plan for future episodes, and we've got some great things lined up, and we've talked to some potential guests that we want to introduce you to. Next, we're going to talk about, as I alluded to it earlier, we're going to talk about that narrowboat experience that we had, And what I would say as a prelude to that is not all perceived refinements turn out to be refinements. So that I will leave you with that little teaser. So we will share that story with you. It's quite an interesting one. It certainly was a fascinating experience, not always in a good way. We'll do that with you next time. In the meantime, we are developing a Facebook page and a blog to go hand in hand with this brand new podcast of ours. There we'll use that. This is if you may well be only listening to this on audio, but it is available on video too. If you want to see us recording the podcast episodes that we do as live, so whatever happens, as I'm fond of saying. But what we're going to try and do with those Facebook page and blog is to give you some visuals that go along with some of the things that we're talking about here. So thanks for coming along with us on this journey. We appreciate it very much. We look forward to continuing it with you. It'll take all kinds of twists and turns as we go on in our retirement life. Oh no, I mean our refinement life, don't I? So for now, anyway, it's goodbye from me, Tony.
And goodbye from me, Christine.
So thank you all very much. See you in the next one. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.